Hello everyone and welcome to the RURBANIVE Podcast series, where we explore how local innovation is strengthening rural-urban connections across Europe. I'm Panagiotis Dalagiannis, Communications Manager at Refrain Food, and in today's episode we focus on biodiversity and restoration, and how degraded landscapes can be transformed into functioning ecosystems through science, collaboration, and local action. I'm joined by Dr. Mirto Tsiknia from our partner, the Agricultural University of Athens, representing a rural-urban enabler working on ecosystem restoration. Mirto, it's great to have you with us.
It's great to invite me and be here. Thank you very much.
So to begin with, Milos has a history of mining, specifically quarrying activities. What kind of environmental degradation are you specifically trying to address in the area through this RUE?
Okay, so let's set the scene. Milos is a volcanic island. That means that it has rich deposits in economically important minerals that are exploited by quarrying activities since the mid-20th century for many years. And nowadays Milos is a very important area in exploiting bentonite and perlite, two very important industrial minerals, which has very unique for the island characteristics. So, quarrying activities, we have to have in mind that left behind a severe degraded ecosystem. It removes topsoil, which is fertile soil, it removes vegetation, and you lose the biodiversity. It completely changes the landscape. Except from that, we have also that quarrying activities generate a huge amount of deposit for non-economically important material that they are not needed for the industry. So these deposits are piled up and forming engineered landscapes that also this needs to be revegetated and restored. So in Milos, as I described, we have loss of soil as a resource, loss of soil functions of soil biodiversity, and an altered landscape.
So I suppose there are some key steps that you're following in order to move from a degraded quarry landscape to a functioning ecosystem again.
Indeed. So we have to assist revegetation and restoration of this ecosystem. We can, of course, leave the nature do its job, but it will happen in times beyond human-related aspect. So what we want is we want to reintroduce and establish a functional plant community based on a reference ecosystem. We go and see what type of plant communities exist in nearby undisturbed areas, and we start to design based on the bottlenecks we identify, which in our case are two. The unfertile matrix that we need to plant to transplant the species there, and of course the very unique specific pedoclimatic conditions of the island, which pose a huge constraint. We have seasonal droughts, we have high temperatures, and are things to consider. For that, we choose local indigenous plant, and that is because they have evolved all the year naturally, and they have gained traits to combat these abiotic stresses that this environment has. So first of all, there has been done an exceptionally good job in developing propagation protocols to cultivate these indigenous plant species in the greenhouse and to produce them in massive amounts, to use them in the restoration efforts. And restoration, it happened in two steps. The first year, there is sowing of a seed mixture of annual grasses, flowers, legumes, to have the first year plant biomass above ground, but also root biomass in the below ground, so to have the first structure in that unstructured deposit material, so to enhance the establishment of the perennial plants you're going to transplant the following years.
And there's a second step as well?
The transplantation.
Okay.
You go after the first year to the second year, where you go and you transplant the plants and you build the communities that you want to have there and form there.
It seems a lot of
it takes time.
Knowledge and time
Yes.
needed. Okay. So, is there a way in which you are measuring the success of this whole process?
Yes, of course. The first thing, as you imagine, is the survival. To check on how many plants have survived this transplanting procedure. We replace dead plants for 2, maximum 3 years, and then we leave the nature evolve that community we have tried to establish there. Afterwards, what we do is that we measure in the lab some key soil health indicators that has to do with soil organic matter build-up and its quality, on the nutrient stock that it's there, on the diversity that's coming back in this soil matrix. So at the transplantation phase, it is a key step that we do that phase during the rainy season. And that's because we want to take advantage of well watering the plant during transplantation, because irrigation is not an option in this ecosystem. We cannot transfer volume of water and irrigate the plants during summer. So we do the transplantation in the rainy season to be well watered for the next year.
And Mirto, you're also using microbiome-based restoration, which might sound a little technical. Can you explain in simple terms what that means and why it matters?
Yes, of course. So we have to know first that soil microorganisms plays a crucial role in preserving key soil functions like carbon cycle, other nutrient cycles, and aggregation stability and soil structure. And especially in the rhizosphere, the environment of soil that it's under affection of root activity, there the microbes that live there form communities that interact with the plant, direct or indirect, and offer benefits to the plant, helping them for their survival, for their nutrition, for their tolerance against abiotic stresses, like drought, which in our case it's super important. Have in mind at the same time that the last decades, the tools, the molecular tools we have to explore diversity has unraveled us a huge diversity within the environment of the rhizosphere and how many microbes exist there. But up to now, we have fallen short to isolate and perform efficient microbial inocula and reintroduce them in the plant, so to be specific tailored for the plant needs. So in our case, in restoration in Milos Island, we have came up with a very simple nature-based idea to take advantage and use nature knowledge on which microbe best suits for each plant. So we go to rhizosphere of plants we want to use in the restoration, and we take with small interviews, we take some soil rhizosphere and we prepare slurries where we introduce them in the greenhouse phase where the plants that are supposed to go and transplant in the field are growing, and we reintroduce these slurries back in the transplantation. So that is our approach. We call it crude inocula, and we try different methods and we try to make it better and work more efficient as a solution, as a microbiome tool.
And again, how do you measure success in this process?
Yes, of course. So success in this restoration is that we measure plant survival. We replace dead plants for the first 2-3 years, and afterwards we leave the nature to evolve that plant community as it likes. And then we go back to the laboratory and we monitor more timely functions like soil organic matter buildup and its quality. We measure how structure starts forming, the water infiltration, how erosion is prevented, and the nutrients that are accumulated in this matrix. And of course, we monitor how diversity in the soil matrix reintroduces and starts to increase.
Okay, and I want at this point to be realistic. The area also depends on tourism and quarrying. How do you balance environmental restoration with the ongoing economic activity?
Indeed, and there is a very increased pressure for land use, so reclaiming degraded land back and providing them for other uses. It is very important for the sustainable development of the island. I think that both activities need honest and long planning so to sustain their sustainable development in the island and not to conflict each other.
Also agriculture, a key part of this work is integrating natural ecosystems with agriculture. How do you ensure that these two systems can coexist rather than compete?
Mm-hmm. If you consider using this land not for natural ecosystem restoration, but for cultivation, is another nature-based solution for how to bring life back to this degraded ecosystem. And these two activities used to coexist in the past, and we believe that it can happen now, and also it can provide alternative economical activities that can be developed in the island and support the locals there.
This kind of work involves many actors, and that leads me to my favorite question, which has to do with stakeholders. And what role do local stakeholders like farmers or local authorities play in shaping the restoration approach?
I think that it's a very easy question to answer, because if you see what we have already discussed, everyone can understand that we have a key role, because only with their collaboration, active participation, and of course their valuable input, we can actually shape restoration practices and define goals and outcomes.
Okay, and I think that's the key, to engage different stakeholders.
Exactly.
To make your approach a success. And you're also creating a botanical path as part of the project. What is the purpose beyond being an educational feature?
Yes, it is. I like to say it's a flagship project, the botanical path. Because first of all, it also provides a natural heritage place where all the indigenous plants can be found. And it is a great example how touristic activities, if you see it, except for educational reason, as an alternative touristic activity to walk through this botanical path and know the nature of the island, it is a great example of synergism between touristic activity and restoration.
That's interesting. And what have been the biggest challenges, Mirto, that you faced so far?
So, if you go back and remember the steps we try to say about the restoration, it's step has challenges, okay? From designing the plant community, you want to establish, successfully reproduce it and make amounts of these plants to have available for restoration, for providing good input in the greenhouse for fertilizer, organic material and everything for the first year of the plant, for water management and how to deal with the water scarcity, that it's super important for for Milos Island, and of course for tailoring and making the microbial inocula we develop and we introduce as microbiome solutions for restoration.
Many challenges, but you are trying to address them.
Yes.
Okay. So one last question for this podcast session, and it has to do with the transferability of what you're doing. Could it be applied in other degraded landscapes across Europe?
Yes, I would say definitely yes. It could be applied. In terms of, you can see it as a walkthrough in drought environments, as drought is expanding in Europe due to climatic change. The measure we take and the strategies we adopt to deal with our drought ecosystem can be also used an example in other cases. And of course, the knowledge that has to do with indigenous plant species and the microbiome-based solutions we introduce can be transferred in other degrading landscapes across different regions of the Europe.
And we hope after the conclusion of the project to see other areas mimetizing all this knowledge and follow the example of what you're doing. Thank you very much, Mirto, for this interesting discussion that we had.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, for us, very interesting project we have.
Thank you again, Mirto. And thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more stories from across Europe, where our partners are turning local challenges into real impact.